3, 2. What's up, guys? We're VRDGO, and thank you so much for tuning back into our channel. We have a very exciting episode today where we're going to share with you guys how we got signed to ARMADA Music. Now, a lot of you guys may have heard of ARMADA Music, and some of you may have not. It's probably, when you think of the world's biggest dance music labels, it's top 3 by far, especially if you Google it. It was founded in 2003 by 3 individuals, Michael, David, and the world famous Armin van Buuren. He's been voted the #1 DJ multiple times in a row, and he's also based out of the Netherlands. And when you think of how you get signed to record labels today, it's a little bit different than back in the day where you might sign a multi-album deal, especially in the dance music world. People sign singles these days, so you're not exclusively owned by them, but you can represent the label that you, of course, put that single out. And there's a couple other things that my brother's going to share with you today that we're going to discuss as well.
Right. So just how long we've been producing, and we'll talk about some of the struggles that we've gone through in order to get to where we're at today in terms of, finally getting a record signed to one of the biggest dance music labels in the world, like my brother said. And we'll talk about just, some of the things that helped us to accomplish and get through some of the frustrations and challenges that come with trying to get signed to a major label. And then last, we'll talk about some of the support that we got as a result of getting signed to ARMADA. It was support that was just unprecedented. We didn't know who was going to support the release and, and actually include our track in their mixes. But we were pretty blown away when we found out. So we can't wait to share that with you. So stick around and let's get into it.
All right, guys. So like we mentioned, so how did we get into producing? Well, we're originally childhood DJs. We got into DJing, scratching, mixing, doing the full 9. But it wasn't until about 2005 that we got into music production. And back then in 2005, it doesn't seem that long ago, but there really wasn't production schools. There really wasn't a lot of online tutorials like you see today, in terms of YouTube. If you're looking how to make a hip hop beat or a techno beat, you could pretty much find any type of tutorial, no matter what it is on YouTube today. So we started out with this program. It was called Fruity Loops. Some of you guys have heard of Fruity Loops out there?
FL Studio.
FL Studio, right? And we were clueless as heck, and we had to go online and back, like I said, there's no tutorials back then, and just Google on how to just get the basic operation of using this program. We did a lot of sampling back then, disco loops, old school loops, you name it. And we were just trying to get the basic fundamentals down. And honestly, I would say one of the biggest struggles when it comes to being a music producer is trying to define your sound. Wouldn't you agree?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we're still working on it. I mean, there was a period of time where we were a lot more consistent with our music production, and we did sort of develop our own style based on just, the sample packs that we were using, just it had like a consistency to it. But, so sometimes life gets in the way. We started working full time and going to school full time, and that really just, took away time from producing. And so now we're, kind of like back in that same boat. We're trying to figure out what our sound is again. We do have some, sense of where we're going, and we're actually really excited about some of the new sounds that we've been developing lately in the lab.
Yeah, I mean, I would say we're totally carving out a new style, a new sound. I don't really want to tell you guys exactly what we're going to coin this genre. It's definitely house music, but we have a new sound, fresh sound that we're excited to share. And it's just combining a lot of our influences and things that we grew up on and putting our twist on it with today's dance music. And we're going to be releasing a new song in regards to that new style probably within the next couple months. So definitely keep an eye out on that.
Yeah. But just to kind of expand on what you're saying though, and I think this is interesting because, trying to figure out how we can get signed to a big label, there's all kinds of people that have all sorts of different advice out there. And I could think of one person in particular, I won't mention his name, but he's a big major producer. He owns a major label. And I remember him saying that if you want to be on a particular label, and he was specifically talking about his label, you have to really live and breathe and immerse yourself in that label's sound and their style. And he said you have to like really kind of meditate on that label for about a month. And when I heard that, it really kind of hit me. I was like, you know what? He's right. I mean, you really do have to kind of study it, get familiar with the catalog,
the artist,
and understand the common thread that sort of defines that label sound. And so we did that, and we did it over and over again.
With a few different labels.
A few different times.
We not only try to master the styles just to get, a similar vibe going on, but we also carved our own unique twist of that particular style. For example, whether it's progressive or techno, we always put something in there that meant something different that stood out to us, whether it was a certain style of percussion, a certain style of synth, and we still do that today.
Right. So, again, I mean, trying to develop your own sound, it just takes time. It takes an accumulation of, samples, and, you learn from different people. And again, like he said, just to kind of expand on that, you're basically just taking all your favorite elements from all your different artists that you're influenced by, and you're putting it into your own amalgamation, right? You're making your own song that includes like, okay, I like these kind of claps and snares. I like this kind of bass line.
I like these style of leads. I like
whatever
these
style,
it is, these style of bass lines, whatever it may be, like my brother said. But the most important thing is to put your own unique twist to it. Don't just grab a simple preset and say, okay, I'm going to make a song like this. You want to customize it. Even if you use a preset, work with all the different knobs and different types of things on there, whether it's the release, the attack, if you're for the music producers out there, and just totally customize that sound so it fits something different that represents you.
I mean, it's easier said than done, though, right?
No, absolutely.
I mean, because let's just be honest. There's been times where, we studied a label, we produced something that we thought was totally up their alley, and it got rejected because, why? They would try to say that it wasn't original enough. So that's a trap that, many producers fall into, and, sometimes, not intentional, right? You're just trying to fit into that label in particular, but it seems like the A&Rs, they always want something completely new. They want their wig split every time, they hear the drop by something completely different and unique. And that's the challenge. It's because you don't really understand exactly what they're looking for, or, there's really no intelligence in terms of what direction the label is going to go to.
You're just trying to create that vibe, that vibe that fits their label. So if it's like a tech house label, you're not going to make a big progressive house banger and try to get it on a tech house label. It has to have that tech house vibe, even if it's your style or something similar to the style that the label continuously puts out.
Right. Depending on the label, though. I mean, of course, there's labels out there like Mousetrap that, although it seems like their focus is on a lot of, techno and tech house.
They put out,
I've heard, all kinds of different stuff, right?
Yeah, so it's really hard to just pinpoint exactly, okay, this is it. This is the song that's going to go for this particular label. But the most important thing is, you're not going to create a hip hop beat and send it to a techno label. You have to at least be somewhat up that alley.
Right. And you know what? The larger point is that sometimes this could take a long time. This is literally a journey. And, there's some parallels between our story and, famous, UFC fighters such as Jorge Masvidal, who just, recently fought. And unfortunately, he kind of fell short. And Usman successfully defended his title.
That's on his
but what I'm trying to say is
6-day notice.
Yeah, 6-day notice. On a full camp, different story. But that's another podcast. What I'm trying to say is, Jorge was in the game fighting at a professional level at UFC for 16 years, going on 17 years, and he finally got a shot at the title. Some people, they get it in 2 years, but in his case, it was a long time. I mean, he basically, almost his entire career, he finally gets a crack at becoming the champion. And for us, it took us about 15 years. We started producing in 2005. It's 2020. And we got signed to ARMADA 2019.
So 14 years to get it, sign our first major song to a major label.
Right.
Yeah, but we've been producing definitely for 15 years. And at the end of the day, going back to what my brother's saying, this is a marathon. This isn't a sprint. You don't just put records out and expect it for everything just to go big and your career to take off. I mean, it's never ending. Even if you put out a good single, what's that quote one of the artists told you about, in terms of your success? You're as successful as your last.
Oh, you're only as big as your last record.
Yeah, exactly.
That was something that one of the guys from Cosmic Gate shared with me.
You guys were hanging out, and how did that happen? You guys were hanging out in Vegas, right?
Yeah. So he was there with a resident DJ from Hakkasan, and I just happened to be there with another mutual friend of ours. And I remember him saying that, we're kind of sitting there. We're at Topgolf in Las Vegas. So shout out to Topgolf.
When was this? Like just a few years ago, right?
Just a couple years ago.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so we're hanging out. And I remember him saying, you're only as big as your last record. And I was like, yeah, that's.
No, I remember.
Thinking to myself, that's very true.
You called me on the phone. You're, hey, this big artist, and we've known Cosmic Gate for a long time. My brother shared that with me, and that left a big impact because that's the truth, right? You put out a record, it does good, it may do amazing, but you have to continue. That's the biggest thing, like I mentioned earlier, the marathon. And like we mentioned, when we finally signed this big record, it was almost surreal, would you say?
Oh yeah, we had to pinch ourselves. I mean, really, you know, it wasn't finalized until we actually got that signed copy. So we really, you know, were nervous about talking prematurely about it and letting anyone know. Although we just had so much excitement building up inside of us, we're like, okay, I think this is about to really happen. We're getting finally signed, you know, to a major reputable dance music label that the world recognizes. And, you know, like you said, I mean, it's got some of the biggest names on the planet. I mean, Avicii, you know, rest in peace. He was on the label. So many guys, you know, Applejack, you know, Ferry Corsten. There's so many guys that are just, you know, ultra famous. And it's surreal to be on the same label, to be associated with those names. And not only that, you know, it kind of brings us to like the third part of our story.
But before we get there, I got a question for you.
Yeah, sure. Yeah.
So if you could give to all the producers that are out there in the world, right? And there's a lot, of course, that are wanting to maybe do something similar to us or get signed to a label such as the one we got signed to, ARMADA, or their dream label of their choice. What's the biggest piece of advice that you could give to an artist, especially if they're contacting these A&Rs, right? Because these guys, these A&Rs are getting their email boxes flooded if you can even get their contact email, which is already difficult to begin with. But what would you say the biggest piece of advice is for those producers that are trying to get their record signed?
The biggest advice is,
especially for the busy A&Rs that are, you know, getting their emails and their contacts just hounded.
Well, I feel like you want me to boil it down to like one word or something, or one
You don't
sentence.
have to boil it down in one word, but what would you say for the people that are trying to get signed out there?
You know, I would say that the most important thing is you have to have this championship mindset, you know, that you cannot give up. Okay? Because there's somebody out there that's working twice as hard, who comes from, you know, a different background, that is not willing to give up. And the second you do, that person wins. You know what I'm saying? So, you know, and there's only so much room, you know, for you know, producers to, you know, get to the top. And that's what makes it so competitive.
Yeah.
I mean, this is a very competitive sport. You know, there's a lot of parallels between the dance music industry, music production in general, and life, right?
Would you also say it's just equally as important to try to get some feedback from some other successful producers possibly, or